All right, Luke, I got a really important question for you.
What's your really important question, KT?
I have been thinking about this probably longer than it's healthy to be thinking about.
Okay. As long as you're aware of that, I feel like it's okay.
Yeah. That's the first
Maybe
step.
not, but you know.
Awareness is the first step.
Yeah.
What is the best Gatorade flavor?
Light blue.
Okay, first of all, light blue isn't a flavor.
But
light blue is a color.
Look.
I bet on the bottle it doesn't say light blue.
If you know the flavors, like if you know the names of the flavors of your Gatorade, you're thinking about it too hard.
If you know the name of the...
If you have to think about the name of the flavor, if you can't just go in and look at the colors and be like, I'm in the mood for that color.
Right.
You're thinking about Gatorade too much.
Well,
the correct answer is light blue.
Light blue, huh?
Yeah.
You know what? You're allowed to have your opinion. Your opinion's wrong, but you're allowed to have it, okay? Because the correct answer, the actual correct answer...
is light blue.
...is yellow.
No.
Lemon.
No.
The OG.
No.
Lemon lime.
Nah.
You're wearing a yellow shirt.
That doesn't... You're wearing a blue shirt. What's your point? Call it even?
That's... Sure. No, because lemon lime...
I win.
No, lemon lime is it's the OG.
Nah.
It is the original flavor, and it's the best.
No.
Look, light blue has its place.
The original doesn't always equate to the best. Sometimes things can be improved on.
I will agree with you on
including
that.
Gatorade.
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Light blue is the best.
Don't get me wrong. I like the light blue.
I mean, yeah.
But it's not the best.
I mean, yellow's not the best.
You know,
it's probably in my top 5 or so.
I'm going to catch some flack for this one, but you know which one actually is like really, really slept on? Grape. Purple.
Oh, yeah. Not my favorite.
I'm not a grape person. Like, I love grapes.
I just don't see it that much. Because it's kind of slept on.
True, yeah. They don't put it out because most,
Like, when I think about the traditional lineup of Gatorade, grape's not in it.
No, it's
because I haven't seen it as much.
It's lemon lime. It's the yellow, red. I'd say orange.
Orange is there a lot.
And then the 2 blues, the dark and the... Here's the thing. When it comes to the blues, I'm going with the dark blue.
No.
Yeah.
No. The dark blue is too...
Fine. Give me your top 3.
Top 3.
And
light blue.
In order.
Light blue's number 1.
Okay.
Honestly, red's solid. I might go red number 2. Red's solid.
To me...
You can't go wrong with any of that classic lineup. None of them are going to be bad.
To me, red is for, like, children after a T-ball game.
Yeah.
That's where red Gatorade belongs.
Yeah, so all the nostalgia is with red. And then...
That's number 3.
I could say dark blue for 3, but I'm not going dark blue over light blue.
Lemon lime's not even in top 3?
I'm not... I don't know. Maybe 4th.
I'm going to beat you up after we record.
That's fine. It wouldn't be the first time. I'm just kidding. Ha, it's funny. Ha. I'm just kidding.
Okay, for the record, I've never laid hand... No, that's not true.
You've never beaten me up.
I've never beaten Luke up. I've hit him, but only because he deserves it.
Yeah. I'll take it when I deserve it.
Yeah. Sure, I'll tell you my top 3. Thanks for asking.
Okay, thanks, KT. What are your top 3?
Sure. Lemon lime at number 1.
Yeah, sure.
Yellow at top. I'll probably go dark blue number 2.
Okay.
And then orange number 3.
So the closest we agree on is dark blue. Dark blue is a solid.
That's an atrocity.
Yeah, because you think that lemon lime is the best. That is an atrocity.
I am going to beat you up now.
Okay, yep. That's fine.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Valley Bible Studies Podcast. We're so excited to have you on.
I feel like you switched from mean to kind really quickly right there.
I'm fine.
Anyway.
I'm a teacher. I have to.
That's fair.
No, we're really excited to be back in the room to record. We're really excited to get into Colossians. After the last 2 podcasts that we've had with guests,
which you should go listen to if you haven't yet.
If you haven't,
because both of the guests that we've had are phenomenal people and were phenomenal guests.
Yeah, phenomenal guests, phenomenal people, phenomenal preachers. Just wonderful people with good insight on God's word.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't yet, check that out because we were really excited to record with them.
Yes.
Really excited to get
good
it out
men
to
of
you
the
guys.
faith.
Yes, absolutely.
But now you're stuck with us again.
Yeah. Yikes.
So it's Colossians time.
It is Colossians time.
We're wrapping up the 3 big prison epistles. There's one more, but it's later and shorter.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Colossians is the other big one. And Colossians is the one that, to me, is the most directly Christ-centric. Obviously, all of them are Christ-centric, and that's like the first chapter of Philippians that we talked about 2 weeks ago. We talked about how more Christ is like one of the big themes of Philippians. But Colossians, to me, is the most, like, Paul is almost going out of his way to say, the focus is Jesus. The focus is Jesus. Everything that you do, from the theoretical down to the very, like, minute details of your life, the focus is Jesus. That's what Colossians is about.
Right, and it's not about this, it's about Jesus.
Right.
It's not about that, it's about Jesus.
So when I think of the word picture that comes to mind when I think about Colossians is a compass. And Jesus is like the point at which the compass
He's north.
points. He's north, yeah. Because everything that you do revolves around being like him.
And going towards him.
And going towards his example. Yeah.
It's like, you ever seen the Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yeah.
I'm getting really off track.
Where the compass is like
it's
what you want most.
Yes. It's the thing you desire the most. And so imagine you have...
for a Christian,
right.
that should be Jesus.
Should be Christ.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. So to give a brief outline of Colossians, which is going to be a really short outline because it's 2 points. But Colossians you can divide really nicely in half, the first 2 chapters and the last 2 chapters. And Paul sort of hits the reset button as far as his flow from theological to practical in the middle. So at the beginning, he's talking in very lofty and high terms about Christ, about the fact that Christ is the head of the church. He's the reason that creation exists. He's the reason that we exist, both in creation and as the church. He's the example that we follow. He talks in very lofty terms about that, and then makes his way from that through the mystery of godliness, which if you read Paul is the mystery of the Jews and Gentiles being in the same church, works his way through that, and then works his way down to the Colossians situation specifically. That's what a lot of chapter 2 is about. And then he sort of hits the reset button, and at the beginning of chapter 3, we're going to have a lot to say about that paragraph that starts chapter 3, because it's big.
Yep.
But he sort of starts over at the theological and goes back to, like, be raised with Christ. That's his big point there. And then again works towards the practical. And he starts at the top and says, here's, in a very, like, ideal sense and mental and emotional and spiritual sense, here's what that looks like. And works his way towards the practical, like here's what that looks like on a daily basis, especially in your relationships at the end of chapter 3. But yeah, there's a outline of sorts.
Of sorts.
Yeah. We'll call it an outline.
Yeah, because I mean, in chapter 1, it's a lot of the reason we do it.
Yes.
You know,
and chapter 1 is very hymnic.
Yeah.
There's a section, I think it's verses 15 through 20, that a lot of scholars who look into like the details of the biblical text think may have actually been a hymn that Paul is either writing or is quoting.
Nice.
Like a hymn that the church would have sang in the first century.
That's neat.
Would have sang, would have sung? Would have sung.
Would have sung. They would have sung it. They would have
sang it. A song
it.
they done sang in the first century. That, you know.
I'm the redneck of the group.
Well, if you get it wrong enough, no one will care if you're right. Anyway.
I don't think that's how that works.
It is this time. It's a hymn from the first century.
We're talking about the Bible. I don't think this is if you get it wrong enough.
Don't follow my advice in that case. But
oh man,
other than grammar.
So
that only applies grammatically.
Right.
Now let's start talking about the biblical text again.
There we go. I really want to look into verse 19. But because it 19 through 23 are talking about the reconciliation that is within Jesus.
Right.
And so this is kind of the headline, the tagline or whatever you want to call it, that I want to attach to this.
Okay.
Only God can reconcile us through Christ's sacrifice.
Right.
It's a two-parter.
Mm-hmm.
The only person that can do it is God, and the only way that happens is through Christ.
Sure.
And
well, for me, the thing that ties the hymn together is verse 17. Verse 17 says, "He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." So the verses before that talk about Christ's role in creation. He is the one who is the image of God.
What version are you looking at?
The ESV this time.
See, we flip.
Sorry. So he's
all right. So
before
read 17 again in ESV.
In ESV, verse 17 is, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together.
So in the New King James, it's he is before all things, somewhere.
And in him all things consist.
Consist.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that a little bit better.
Well, the Greek word behind that is something between those two ideas. Like, you're both made up of that thing, and it also holds you together.
I like that.
So the verses before that, he talks about how that's true in creation, because Jesus is the image of the invisible God.
Right.
And in the verses after that, he talks about how that's true in the church, because he is both the one who we are supposed to be transforming into and the one who holds us together as a unified body. Yeah. So that's the key point for me. But then, as you were saying, in the process of salvation, that's the second of those two steps. God's the only one who can do it, but the only way that it's possible is because of Christ.
It's all happening through Jesus.
Right.
And the next thing I want to look at is verse 24 of the same chapter. I just want to look at the first 6 words of verse 24.
Okay.
I now rejoice in my sufferings. That's a weird statement, right?
In a sense, yeah.
Because
it's not the instinct.
Right. Well, when was the last time that you were going through something really tough and you're like, oh, this is the best?
Can't think of one.
Exactly. And that's, well, one, that's the difference between us in the 21st century. It seems as if we always have something to complain about. And that old person saying, how you doing? And then you say, can't complain. Do you know where I'm getting?
Yeah.
It's because they say
you could.
Nobody listens to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty straightforward in terms of the application here, because if you're going to complain, first off, nobody likes to listen to a complainer.
Correct. Especially a complainer. I almost said complainer Christian, but I'm going to say complainer who's pretending to be a Christian. Because really,
elaborate.
If your goal is to be like Christ, right? That's what Christian.
Not complain.
That's what Christian means.
Yep.
Is to be someone who is like Jesus.
Correct.
Complaining's kind of out of the picture.
Yeah.
Because he went through way more than any of us are ever really going to go through, and didn't complain once.
Yep.
That didn't mean he enjoyed it all the time, but he was never poor pitiful me about it.
Yeah. I like what he's saying here, just because I now rejoice in my sufferings. Because when you're rejoicing in your sufferings, that means you have something to suffer for. It gives that higher purpose.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about purpose a lot.
Yes, we have. And that's kind of a reoccurring theme throughout the New Testament, because our purpose is Christ. Our purpose is to live for
to glorify God like he did.
Exactly. And I think in this letter, that's exactly what he's doing. He's glorifying God, even though he's going through some seriously tough times.
Once again, this is the third of the 3 big prison epistles.
Yeah.
He's in jail as he's writing.
He's in jail. If you went down to the prison right now and asked almost every prisoner, hey, are you happy to be here?
No.
Hey, are you happy?
Not at all.
Are you glad you're going through this?
Not even close.
Exactly. They're all going to say no, and then they're going to have something to complain about, because that's the world that we live in today. And
that's not exclusive to prison.
No, it's not.
But it's like, especially if you're in a situation like that.
Yeah, I complain. You complain. We go through different things. I mean, you've gone through some things that I have never gone through. I've gone through some things that you've never gone through. And yeah, we powered through, but we also complained along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Not once. I don't want to speak for you, but rarely do we glorify God and thank him for the position that we're in, even though that position's tough.
Yeah. It's definitely not where your mind jumps.
No. And so so my best friend Aaron, who
Hi, Aaron.
recently moved away.
Bye, Aaron.
So best friend? I don't know. No, he's still my best friend. He has a car. When were you born?
01. Is the car older than me?
Almost.
Okay.
You're just a couple of years older than it is. But Aaron has an old car, and the car has been through it.
Mm-hmm.
It's had this problem, it's had that problem, it's been in and out of the shop. But Aaron holds on to it because Aaron doesn't want to spend money for anything.
Sure.
Which I
understandable.
I admire that about him. But I remember one time when we were in high school, because he had the car in high school, and something was wrong with it. I don't remember what, because that was, forever ago. But he was kind of complaining about, the car being in the shop, and he's complaining about how it's going to, take forever to get fixed, and yada, yada, yada. And he said, yeah, but at least God let me have a car. I'm like, I think it was like 17, for a 17-year-old to say that.
That's very mature.
Right.
Because a lot of adults don't even include that in the conversation.
Right.
Or in their thought process.
It's all about perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the fact that, I might be going through this problem, but at least I have, X, Y, and Z that God gave me.
And the biggest parts of that he talks about here in Colossians 1 are, at least I have Jesus, who I can rely on, and at least I have the church to help me pull through.
And what's crazy is that is just as true then as it is now.
Yeah. That hasn't changed.
Whatever hardship you're going through, you should be able to fall back on your church.
Mm-hmm.
You should be able to fall back on the people that love you and are there to support you. And Jesus is always going to be there to support you.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
That's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. That's a good 2 cents.
Is it 2 pretty pennies?
Yeah.
And that kind of takes me to verse 28. I want to look at the first 3 words of verse 28.
Okay. Which are?
Him we preach.
Yes. This is a big.
I just got Luke really excited.
This is a big thing for me.
Because you're a preacher.
I am. That's true. And I think, and this is one preacher, one Christian within the church. I think we could stand to preach about the Gospels more.
I would agree with you.
Because
as a non-preacher.
Yes, Acts is important.
Yeah.
The letters that we're going through are important.
Yeah.
None of them make sense without the Gospels.
Right.
Because if you don't understand who Jesus was, what he did, why he did it, why it matters, no one's going to want to read about what Paul has to say without knowing the foundation that it's laid on.
Well, it's like that compass we were talking about.
Right, that's got to be number one.
Right, you can have the compass, but if you don't know how to get there, if you don't know how to use the compass.
Right. It's the compass and the map.
Yeah.
The Gospels are the compass. The rest of the New Testament is the map.
Right.
You have to have both. Because if you just have a compass,
how are
you know what direction you're going, but you don't know where the goal is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if you just have the map, okay.
Yeah.
But how are you going to navigate?
And so let me agree with you for just a second.
If you must.
There is a place. There's a time and a place to talk about the letters. There's a time and a place to talk about the things that we're talking about currently. This is KT's personal opinion. So it doesn't really matter. But it seems as if we get carried away talking about how to be a Christian and how to conduct yourself as Christians and what to do and what not to do. And while, you need to talk about those things, because if you just talk about, the goal, but don't talk about how to get to the goal, then, it's going to be a little redundant. But the reason we do the things that we do and the reason we don't do the things that we do and the reason that we live our lives the way that we do is because of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems, I'm not blaming anyone, I'm not putting anyone, throwing anyone under the bus or anything, but it seems as if we've gotten away from preaching him.
We could stand more gospel.
I agree.
Yep. And that's, even in the letters, that's kind of what they're saying. Is, the letters are important, but the letters are important because Christ is the reason that we're here in the first place.
Well, and it also continues, him we preach, warning every man and teaching every man in all wisdom, that we may that we may present every man perfect in Christ Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It's because then that's kind of we preach Jesus, and then we preach about how to be like Jesus.
Mm-hmm. So, jumping ahead a little bit into Hebrews, which we're going to get there in a few weeks, but in chapter 5 of Hebrews, the Hebrews writer almost has to stop himself mid-sentence and say, now here's where I'm going, but y'all aren't ready for that yet.
I think you've actually talked about this before.
Have I before?
I think.
Okay, well, I'm actually talking about the next thing that he says. So he stops himself, but then the next thing he says is, before we get there, we have to return to the elementary principles of the faith.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what he talks about for the next little bit? The basics of who Christ is.
Yeah.
And the basics of what that means.
Yeah.
As in, the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we need to start. And the thing about it is, again, there's a time and a place for the letters. There's a time and a place for here's how to do X, Y, and Z. Don't start evangelizing from there, though. Because if you don't teach people who Jesus is, they're not going to want to change. I wouldn't want to change. The only reason that I'm here is because Jesus showed me how to be the best version of myself.
And if you start losing people there because you're talking about how to live, but you aren't talking about who you live for,
mm-hmm.
people are going to stop listening to you. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to start listening to other people that think they know what they're talking about, that aren't talking about Jesus.
Yes.
Because if those people don't know Jesus, and then that's not really going to be a concept to them. That's not going to be, a goal or a mind fixation for them.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to start looking elsewhere for guidance.
Yeah.
Because to us, it's don't do this, don't do that, that sort of thing.
Right.
And they're going to look other places for validation. The only validation that you and I need, Luke, is what Christ Jesus gives us.
Which is his death.
Exactly. But if you don't look to Christ,
you're going to find it somewhere else.
You're going to find that validation somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we get into chapter 2, looking at places like verse 8, right? So, in verse 8, New King James, this is what it says. Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ.
Yep.
They're going to look other places. And here's the thing, I'm an academic, you're an academic. I like learning about philosophy. What? Luke just made a very
I wouldn't use the word academic for myself. That's a very
You plan on getting a master's?
I'm planning on it. I'll have to get it first.
Right, but
you've gotten one. You're an academic. Congratulations.
Whatever. Anyway.
But philosophy is cool.
It is cool. That was one of the first classes in college I actually started to pay attention to. Yeah. Everything else was just kind of, whatever, fine, I'll take it because I have to.
And then one of your teachers said, "Why are we here?" And you're like, "Why are we here?"
Yeah. What's the meaning of all this? What is the meaning of all of this? I like reading about different philosophers. I like reading about different, ideologies, and especially when I got into, deeper into my undergrad when it came to, because it was in. My undergrad was social sciences with a concentration on political science.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we got into the philosophy of political ideologies, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Why should government look like this? Well, why should we actually care about that?
Right.
What's the purpose of all of it? And that was really cool. It kind of, it gives you a good mindset of why government is.
And the thing is,
I went down a rabbit hole. I'm so sorry.
No, it's all good. The thing about it is, there are nuggets of truth in that.
Yeah.
Socrates wasn't totally stupid.
No, Plato wasn't totally stupid. Aristotle wasn't totally stupid.
They have nuggets of truth in everything that they say, but none of them are Christ.
Exactly.
None of them are none of them get perfect. Here's why everything is the way that it is.
Mm-hmm.
Only Christ does that. Only Christ's correct version of here's why everything the way that it is fixes the human condition in the perfect way.
The reason that we study about so many different philosophers and the reason that they have so many different ideas that we have to study is because none of them are rooted in Christ.
Yep.
They're
all looking for the same thing, and he's the one who
they all have their own foundations of understanding and foundations of knowledge and truth and wisdom and da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Which, by the way, what's the difference between knowledge and wisdom?
Wisdom is applied.
Wisdom is applied. Think about it like this. I said this in one of our Bible classes not too long ago because somebody posed that question and we might have talked about this on the pod.
I don't remember.
I don't know.
Obviously, I don't remember anything that we actually talk about, so.
It was one time. It's okay.
Yeah, well.
It's okay. But the difference between knowledge and wisdom is knowing that tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not
to put it in a fruit salad.
Right. That sort of thing. And it's and like you said, it's the application. It's knowledge is the understanding, and then the wisdom is actually putting it into practice.
Right.
And
Jesus gives us both.
Exactly. Because in Christ, if he's the foundation of your life, it's fine to look at all those philosophical ideas. It's fine to dabble in this, that, and whatever. But guess what? Everything that you think when Christ is your foundation, everything that you think and all the philosophies that you'll have are going to be Christ-like.
So let's talk about building the bridge between knowledge and wisdom. And let's do that starting in verse 11 of Colossians chapter 2. In him also you were circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised with him through faith in the powerful working of God, who raised him from the dead. And you who were dead in your trespasses and uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with him, having forgiven us all our trespasses, by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities, and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. A lot of words. Here's what he just said. Luke Tatum Revised Standard Version. You have to start with the realization that Christ is the only one who can fix it. Right? The reason that he uses circumcision as a metaphor is because circumcision is something that man has done through the Jewish covenant for a long time to signify that they are the covenant people of God, right? That's the Jewish custom. That's not good enough. It was an important sign for the time in which it was practiced, but it's not good enough. Only Christ can fulfill the circumcision made without hands, and that has to do with your heart. So he gives you the knowledge. Then what do you do with that knowledge? Well, first of all, you're buried with him in baptism. The initial application of the kind of knowledge that Christ gives you is, I need to be with Christ. How am I with Christ in the most intimate and perfect way that I can be? I model the same death, burial, and resurrection that he did. And that's part of the mindset behind baptism. That's the initial wisdom. What happens then? Well, then, all of the rulers and the authorities and the legal demands of my own mindset and the mindset of the world are put off. And I start learning about how to apply his wisdom instead of the wisdom that I was trained to apply. Mm-hmm. That's the process of sanctification, which we've talked about before, is learning to adopt the mindset of Christ, not just in what I think, but also as a motivator for what I do.
Yeah. And in the world that they lived in then, and the world that we live in now, it's understanding that their government and our government they're gonna push different ideas that aren't Christ.
Well, and even like you can talk government, but you can also say like
society.
Me as a person.
Yeah.
I have things that I don't want to do. I have things that I do want to do that Christ asked me to think differently about. And I have to solve that. I have to learn from him so that he can help me solve that on an individual basis and also contribute to the church's ability to solve that on a societal basis.
Sure, yeah.
It's wisdom on both scales, if you want to think about it that way.
Well, and it's, we talk about these philosophies and whatnot, and one of the big concepts or branches of that are talking about certain ideologies, right? And when you look at these ideologies, specifically, I'll go back to what I was talking about with politics, right? So there was a point in my life where it was either go do A or go do B. A was work in either the private sector or maybe education, and option B was work in law, right? Like after undergrad, I applied to law school, got in, looked at it, and was like, that's a lot of work.
I want to sleep sometimes.
Yeah, I was like, that's going to take a lot of time. That's going to take a lot of money. I was like, I'd rather get a job because Sid and I just got married, and I wanted to be able to provide.
Yeah.
So looked at law school. It looked nice. It was enticing and whatnot. But anyway, so I've studied law. I've studied all that stuff. And one of the things that I really liked looking at it, especially being a teacher, there was a moment where I taught government, and it was actually the 1 year that I taught government was in 2020, the election year.
Yikes.
Which was really, really cool because I had students, so like government in high school are for seniors. More than half of my class was about to
vote for the first time.
They were going to vote. They were going to be a part of this election.
That is cool.
So the majority of the time that I spent in that class, I actually looked at them finding out and understanding their political ideologies, their stance in politics.
That's cool.
Because here's the thing. When you look at the majority of Americans, the way that they vote, I can't believe I'm talking about American politics on Valley Bible Studies podcast. Never thought that'd happen. Anyway.
This is where we are.
The way that they vote are the way that their parents voted.
Yeah.
Majority of the time.
Because it's all about...
Every now and then you'll have that one kid that wants to be a rebel and do opposite of
but wholesale, it's all about the wisdom you were trained with.
Exactly. And it's all about your foundation, who taught what to you, and then your perspective of that person. So
part of what Christ asks of you is he has to be your new foundation.
Exactly.
He has to be the basis for that.
That takes us into chapter 3. Chapter 3, verse 1. If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is sitting at the right hand of God.
That raised with Christ is a callback to what we just said. Baptism is the process of doing the gospel for yourself, in a sense. Like joining Christ on the mission of the gospel.
Right, but then being
raised with him, where does your mindset transform? It transforms to be like his.
And so when people are voting, their train of thought is like their parents, because they're the ones that took them every step of the way growing up.
Right.
At this point, as Christians, everything that we do, it's like we're holding Jesus' hand.
Jesus becomes that reference point.
Exactly. And so that's what I think of when it says being raised with Christ, because yes, we're raised from the grave of baptism, but we're also being taken, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
You're taking on a new life, which is what he says in verse 4. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you'll appear with him in glory.
Yep.
That can only happen if you choose to make him your life.
And when you choose to make him your life, you are choosing to get rid of yourself. And that's what we see in verse 5. Therefore, put to death your members which are on earth.
Yes.
You're putting to death, so when you're baptized, you put yourself to death. You die
to yourself.
And
so that you can be raised with Christ.
Exactly. And so when you do that, like it says in verse 5, you're putting death not only your old self, but you're putting to death the things that you used to do. Fornication, uncleanliness, passion, evil desire, covetousness, which is idolatry. All these things that were okay are now not.
Right. Because your foundation has changed.
Exactly. Because your foundation has changed.
You're using a different compass.
Nice callback. Your foundation has changed. Your thought process has changed. Your principles have changed. Everything's changed. Because the way you used to live and the way that you used to think before was, I'm going to do this because
I want to.
Yeah, because it's going to do this.
Or because it seems right to me.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to do this because it's going to do this for me.
Right.
But now it's, I'm going to do this because now I can glorify God.
Yes.
Now I can glorify Christ.
Yes.
I can live like Christ now. I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for him.
And in doing so, you're also doing it for other people. Because Christ's entire mindset was, what can I do, A, to glorify God, B, to help other people be more likely to glorify God. That's basically, like, he starts there in verse 5 of chapter 3, but he goes through a long list, first of things that you put off, and then of things that you put on.
Right.
He puts off the flesh, you put on the spirit. You're putting off the things beneath, you're putting on the things above.
And think about this. So when...
That's down through verse 17, really. Yeah. It's the bulk of the chapter.
It's kind of like if you were to go to school for XYZ, right? and then they come out with a new study on everything that you just studied, and they're like, throw out everything you knew. Here's the new, manual or whatever. You mean
like when they decided that Pluto's not a planet?
Yeah, that's the stupidest thing.
That was really dumb.
But so now, like in verse 10, and put on, excuse me, I can't read. And have put on the new man who is renewed in knowledge, according to the image of him who created him. Again. Everything that you knew, everything that you did is now...
Which now changes your wisdom, too. Because the knowledge that informs your action has changed.
Because now... Yeah, exactly. Because the knowledge... Think about this. The knowledge that you had about the world, is that going to be relevant when applying it to live for Christ?
No.
The knowledge that you gain from Christ to live for Christ, that's the application.
Which is why we should preach Christ more.
Hey, because we're full of callbacks to that, aren't we?
That's sort of the whole point.
And then, so like you said, like 12 through what? What did you say, 17?
17.
Yeah, so 12 through 17, to the verses prior, are talking about the things that you didn't do. Like, you're not to do anymore. Right? Those are the things that are dead. 12 through 17, that's the character of, like, the things that you are to do now.
And here's the thing about 12 through 17. It's all relational. He talks about kindness. He talks about compassion. He talks about patience. He talks about unity. He talks about worshiping together as a church and what that should look like in verse 16. And then at the end, in 17, he says, whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. All of that is relational.
Yeah, I will say, so when Neil, our preacher, who's about to be former preacher.
You heard from him 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. When he first got here, that was one of the biggest things that he pushed, is that we're not going to make it far if we don't know each other.
Yeah.
We're not going to make it far as a church if we don't act like a church.
We can't be strangers.
Right. So that was one of the big things that he harped on. I think that's one of the big things that he did really well, was like forcing us to
get out of your same circle.
Yeah.
Like talk
and to actually
people.
intermingle with other people that, and one of the things that we did were small groups. And a lot of other congregations do small groups, but that was one of the things that we started doing with him kind of, navigating all of that. And it worked.
Yeah.
And there was actually somebody came in, I forget their names, but they came in from Africa. They knew Neil, and so they came in to visit him.
Yes.
And then one of the things that they said that they were talking about was, reflecting on ourselves of, do you know everybody in this room? Have you ever been to all of their homes?
Yeah.
And I looked around in the crowd, and it was pretty full for a Sunday night.
Wednesday night.
It was a Wednesday night, excuse me. And I'm looking around, and there were only 2 people in that room where I hadn't been to their house. And honestly,
a lot of that is small groups, isn't it?
And a lot of it was small groups. Yep. And so I have Neil to thank for that, for coming up with that. But at the same time, it wasn't like, Neil coordinated it, but the other people in the room, they were the ones that opened up their homes.
Yeah.
They were the ones that, brought us in so that we could study together. We ate together, and we had fellowship, and it was really nice.
Yep.
And it allows you to get to know people a whole lot better.
And we talked about this when we talked about Philippians with Neil a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
You can't be a Christian on an island.
Nope.
You can't do it by yourself.
Nope. Not one bit.
Because it's a journey that needs a map and a compass and someone to go with.
You and the callbacks. You're on a roll. You're on a roll.
I like this metaphor. I'm going to use this metaphor.
You know what? Speaking of homes.
Hey! Very good.
Not only are we killing it with the callbacks, we're killing it with the segues.
That one was a little,
a little stretched.
I wasn't going to say stretched, just like out there. Speaking of homes.
Stretched.
Yeah, but we've been... No,
whatever. Speaking of homes, that's when we get into, verse 18 and how a home is to be constructed, so to speak. Right? Husbands being the head of the house, wives submitting to the husband. And we talked about this before, to where submission is not what the majority of people think that it is.
It's not one person makes all the decisions.
Right.
It's both of you are willing to sacrifice your own will for the sake of the greater good.
Right. And then when you look at it from the spiritual perspective, it's not that I'm just going to look at my wife and say, this is what we're doing and you're going to deal with it. That's
not cool.
Don't
do that. To anyone, whether you're related to them or not. That's just not a cool thing to do.
Right. And the reason I'm the head of the house, the reason that my wife submits to me is because we're both submitting to God.
Right.
And that's just the way that it's mapped out. Children, obey your parents. Fathers, don't provoke your children. I really hope that when Paige and any other future children get older, that I can abide by this one.
Yeah.
Becoming a parent changes your perspective on everything. Like everything. You know, I speak, I think, calmer now. I drive slower. I do my best to act out of love now rather than any sort of selfish ambition. You know, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for my family. Mm-hmm. And so reading this, wow, I just got really serious really fast. So, my bad.
But it's true.
It is. And reading this, I really hope that when they get older, Paige and potential children that we have, I really hope that I could be somebody that they look to for guidance, and that they can see patience in the decisions that I make. Well,
and here's the thing, to sort of tie this back into something we've already said. The way in which Paige coming changed your outlook and your behavior, Christ coming should also change you in that way. Because if you change specifically for your family, like changing for your family to an extent is a good thing, but if you change for another person, regardless of who it is, you can be pushed off of that rock much more easily.
Yeah.
Jesus' foundation is eternal and doesn't change.
And I think that's, so for like you and I don't, that's not as directly applicable, because how old were you when you became a Christian?
When I was baptized, I was 11.
Yeah, I was 13. And so, you know, for the last, 15 years? Yeah, for the last 15 years, I've been, did I math right?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. You gave me a look and I got worried.
15's a lot.
Thanks, man. For the last 15 years, that's been my objective is for the most part, I'm far from perfect. But the decisions I make, I have God in mind.
Right.
Whether I make the correct decision or not, but I do have Christ in mind. But then any decision that was, you know, home-based or professional-based or whatever, you know, I did it for me, and then when I got married, I did it for me and Sid, and now I'm doing it for me, Sid, and Paige.
Right.
And it's all about who you care about enough for those decisions to be made for. Did I say that right? I don't think I did.
Yeah, I think so.
If you care enough about someone, you are going to actually consider them when making choices. That's the better way to say that.
And that's why we should preach Christ more.
Hey,
because
man, you're killing it.
In order to have him at the top of the list as far as people you care about,
you have to know about him.
You have to know who he is, and you have to know why you should care about him.
Yeah.
Weird how that works.
Isn't that crazy?
It's almost like Paul wrote this whole letter with like a purpose or something.
And that's something.
Speaking of the whole letter, let's go to chapter 4. Yeah. The biggest statement in chapter 4, so a lot of chapter 4 is more like personal. Like he talks a lot in chapter 4 about people that both he and the Colossians know. But in chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, he makes this statement, which is sort of the end of the like practical statements about what being raised with Christ looks like. Mm-hmm. He says in verses 5 and 6, "Walk in wisdom towards outsiders, making the best use of your time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person."
You want to know my tag that I put on this, like what I wrote down?
What's that?
Because seasoned with salt. That's the thing that really, 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 really stuck out with me.
Yeah.
Some people talk just to be heard.
Yes.
Hold on.
Or to hear themselves think.
Yikes. This is what I wrote. Don't talk just to talk. Make sure that what you say has a purpose.
Yeah. That's good. Well, we've been making a lot of callbacks. This is kind of a callback to something Jesus said.
You've been making a lot of callbacks.
Okay. Well, Paul does too. So, Jesus says, Matthew 5 and verse 13, "You are the salt of the earth. If salt has lost its flavor, it's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under men's feet."
See, that was a callback to Scripture, so I'll give you that one. That was a really, really good one. Everything else has been good. That was a really, really good one.
I figured that Paul doing it was probably better than me doing it.
I would agree with that.
So the point of Jesus' statement, "You are the salt of the earth," is you have to have an impact.
Yeah.
You can't just be doing things to do them. You have to have an impact, and your impact should look like glorifying God and helping other people do that. Because the very next thing that he says is, "You are the light of the world." And the point of the light of the world metaphor is
to be seen.
To be seen, to glorify your Father who is in heaven. They're tied together. You have to have an impact. Your words are going to have an impact.
Yeah. That's like a handful
It's just a matter of choosing the right impact.
Yeah, that's like a handful of episodes ago. We were talking about the pew sitters.
Yes.
Talking about, yeah, sure, you checked off the box. You did everything you were supposed to.
Yes.
But are people actually seeing Christ living in you?
Right. And Paul applies that concept here specifically to your words.
Yep.
Because every word that you say has an impact, whether you realize it or not.
It's the whole example with the toothpaste. You heard it?
Remind me.
So you take the tube of toothpaste and you squeeze all the
toothpaste out.
I used to have a lisp. Leave me alone. You squeeze all of the toothpaste out of the tube.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's all out there, right?
Yeah.
Get it back in.
I will not.
Yeah. The toothpaste, that's your words. Those are the things you say. Once they're out there, and you're not getting them back.
And they've made an impact whether you realize it or not.
Yep.
So Paul is saying, walk in wisdom. Understand your words are going to have an impact. He specifically says, walk in wisdom towards those outside. Your words could help people know Jesus, or they could prevent them from ever trying.
Yeah. There's one of our, there's a friend of mine that he actually was talking about wanting to look into the book of Luke. And I'll tell you, you know who you are. If you're listening, I love you and I'm glad that you're listening. But he didn't know where to look. And he said, I want to start looking into Luke and I don't really know where to, any sort of guidance. And it really made me think of the Ethiopian eunuch. But I said, I got really excited when he said that too. And I was like, ooh, I know where. And I took him to our website.
There's this podcast.
Yeah.
And this website with written studies
I
on
wanted him to listen to the podcast, but I also didn't because him and I have a really personal relationship and in accordance with our profession. So that would have been it. It's one of those, it's weird, but at the same time, what we're doing is good. At least I think it is.
To the extent that it agrees with the Bible, which I think has been pretty close.
And we've said this time and time again, that this
call us out.
This is, well, yeah.
If we stray from the Bible, call us out.
If there's anything that we say that's not in accordance to what God wants us to say, let us know. But two, we're not doing this for you and I. We're not doing this so that people can hear us. We're doing this because...
So people read the Bible.
Yeah. Because one, I mean, and for a selfish reason, this is helping me, so much. Because I'm going into these books deeper and deeper than I ever have.
I've learned a lot.
Because I don't want to get on this podcast
and say something wrong.
And sound like an idiot. And so it's selfishly, it's helping me. But then we also really want to help the people that listen.
Right.
And so to that individual that I'm referring to, I'm not going to say your name for confidential purposes, but this is where we're at, what we're doing. I really hope that anything that I've said to that person, I really hope I've only said things to help him in his Christian walk, because he said he was going to go to YouTube.
Yikes.
And
there's a lot of stuff on YouTube.
There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. There's a lot of great stuff on YouTube.
There's some great stuff on YouTube. There's some not great stuff.
There's some not great stuff on YouTube. And I think that this is a good starting point, at least.
I would hope so.
Because the outlines that you've written are good. Real good.
Why, thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Last statement from Colossians. Very last verse. In the middle of the verse. Chapter 4, verse 18. Paul says, "Remember my chains." I remember one of the first times I read Colossians, that got to me. Like, I got emotional about that because what he's saying there is, see how far I have gone with the gospel and be willing to do that. Paul's about the best example of what it means to follow Jesus that there is. And Paul would say, like we've said, I think, yeah, those examples are awesome. Preach Jesus.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole point. The only reason that Paul's in chains, the only reason that we should be willing to be in chains in the same way is because of Jesus.
Yeah, and everything you do it to glorify Christ.
Right.
And the only way that you can know Christ is if you read about Christ, if you talk about Christ, and if you preach Christ.
Yep. Which helps you live Christ.
Callback.
Uh-huh. We did it again.
That's the last callback of the episode, I promise.
Because we're like done. So.
Yeah. Any additional thoughts?
Well, that was the very last verse of Colossians. So
that's why I said additional.
No, we're good.
Man. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We are, we're like
halfway through.
Yeah.
We're pretty close, I think.
Yeah. That's what I had to think. I had to think about what came out.
That was a very exact calculation.
Yeah, that's how I calculate.
Oh, yeah.
That's how I calculate. Back off.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, love a minute. But thank you so much for being with us here today. Thank you so much for even opening up Valley Bible Studies podcast, for even going to the website. If you did, I don't know. I'm not on your computer.
You should, though.
You should. And there's a lot more than just the podcast. Check out the written studies. Check out the bite-sized Bible studies, the family outlines, the social media. Luke's doing a great job with that. I contribute here and there, but not really. Luke does the majority of the work. And hey, how's your back feeling, man?
What do you mean?
From carrying the team, you know.
Oh, thanks, man.
He's doing a great job with it, and I think we should all check it out. I mean, I'm checking out. I kind of work with him, but
you don't have a choice.
Yeah. Check it out. Reach out to us if you have questions, because that's one of the things we really want to get into. If you have a question or if you have a comment, like send us something, whether that's a message through the website, whether that's an email, whether that's through one of the social media pages. If you send us a question or a comment, like, you know, that's something that we can talk about moving forward.
And here's the promise that I will make. We may not know the answer.
Oh yeah.
But we will do our best to find one.
We will look into the Bible. We will talk to one another. We'll talk to people smarter than us, because there's a lot.
There are many.
There are a lot of those. Yeah, and we'll find an answer for you. Promise. Yep. Yeah.
Even if the answer is I don't know, which we hope to keep to a minimum.
Again, thank you so much for being with us, and we look forward to diving into
First Thessalonians.
That's yeah.
Yep.
And there's two of those too.
There's two of those. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, and open your Bible, read it, pray. We love you.